Welcome back to Square Off. Governor Katie Hobbs made her pick last week for the toughest job in her cabinet. The state's new prisons director will be Ryan Thornell. He's Deputy Corrections Commissioner for the state of Maine. Arizona's prisons have been plagued by scandal for years. The latest outrage? Allegations that pregnant inmates were forcibly induced to give birth. The Arizona Republic's Jimmy Jenkins broke that story and many others that shine a light on troubling problems at the Department of Corrections. He joins us now with a to-do list for the new director and a sketch of who he is. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thanks, Bram.
So let's start with the new director, Ryan Thornell, making a move from Maine, state of Maine, love Maine, to Arizona. Compare, contrast where he is now and what he might face when he gets here.
Well, first we have to think about the sizes of the two institutions. There are around 1,800 people in Maine prisons, where here in Arizona we have close to 35,000. And so if you want to think about different institutions specifically, there are actually 5 Arizona state prisons that have more people in them than the entire population of the Maine prison system. So much bigger task, and like you said, there are so many challenges facing the Arizona prison system that, it's going to be, like we said in the article, he's got his work cut out for him.
And the prison population itself, so much larger, is also vastly different.
Yeah, that's right. We have a broad range of offenders here in Arizona, different security levels, and one of the things that they are currently struggling with is they are using detention too much and isolation too much on the people at the higher security levels, and that's the same kind of problem that they're having in Maine. They've faced similar kinds of lawsuits over isolation and detention, so similar problems in those two different populations.
Okay, so at least one thing's consistent.
Yeah.
Let's go to the to-do list, and your story on pregnant inmates being forcibly induced touched a lot of nerves, as you told me, and it fits into the long-lasting problems, pervasive problems with health care. First, just tell us a little bit about that story and the reaction you got.
Sure. Women incarcerated at the Perryville prison, formerly incarcerated women, have reached out to me for years saying that they had a loss of autonomy during their pregnancy while they were in prison. For some reason, we are still incarcerating pregnant women in Arizona, but while they're in prison, they face a multitude of challenges, and those exacerbate once they get closer to the actual birth of their child. So several years ago, there was a woman who, because they couldn't attend to her quick enough, she gave birth in her cell at Perryville. And the other women say that after that happened, a policy was introduced that they are told when they're going to have their child, and sometimes they were told that, and they were induced to give birth several weeks before their due date.
What's the reaction been from government officials, others?
Outrage. I think most people don't realize how hard it is to just survive in our state prisons, and I think when people are faced with the facts that, we're not feeding them properly, we're not protecting them, and we're not providing adequate health care, I think it shocks a lot of people, and never have I heard so much shock and outrage after we've just told the story, because we just, we believed the women, we believed the stories that they were telling us, and we were able to verify this with their medical records.
And what you're saying about health care isn't you talking, it's a federal judge talking who has declared health care in Arizona prisons unconstitutional, and now this is probably at the top of the to-do list. There's an order that the state finally has to do something. What would that look like, and how much could that cost?
That's right. The federal judge has called it plainly, grossly inadequate health care. We have gone for years now with this lawsuit where they've been trying to increase standards, trying to get better health care outcomes, and it just hasn't worked. So recently, U.S. District Judge Rosalind Silver took the case back to a trial. There were findings of fact, and then there was a remedial order that came down recently, and it outlines much more specific and stringent guidelines that the state is going to have to live up to. They have to have better ratios for healthcare. They also have to have better ratios for staffing, and there could be more stringent penalties following that. It could also cost, one lawmaker said he spoke with a private healthcare provider and thought that it may cost an extra $100 million to come into compliance. That figure, it's unknowable right now, but could be a possibility.
$100 million compared to what they're spending now, which is
$280 million annually. So
that's a really, really big chunk.
Big
okay,
number.
so that's number one on the to-do list. Number two, staffing has been a persistent problem, and not just in DOC, but throughout the law enforcement prison industry.
True, and that's exactly what employees have told us for years. We recently had several brave CEOs from Lewis go off the record, speak to us anonymously, tell us what it's really like day in and day out working in our state prisons, and they're terrified. And then I hear, of course, from incarcerated people all the time and their family members who say, you know, they go without protection. They live in dormitory spaces where they're locked in with hundreds of people. If there was a fire, if there was an assault, you know, no one would be able to get to them in time. So yes, you know, security issues have plagued our prisons for years. One way to do that, you know, is for the court to mandate more people work there. Of course, another way to solve that problem would be to put less people in prisons in the first place.
That's a whole different discussion. And then there's the issue with the prisons themselves. You've written about the problems with air conditioning in them, water. A lot of these prisons are just decrepit places.
Yeah, really crumbling infrastructure everywhere. And it's some of the most expensive buildings that the state owns, and that is all coming due. They're currently taking a step to, like you said, put in a new HVAC system. We are still struggling with the prison doors. Those are still malfunctioning despite millions and millions of dollars being
the cell doors.
That's right, yes.
This was one of the scandals over the last few years.
Just one.
Doors that wouldn't lock.
We keep throwing millions, tens of millions of dollars at it, and you know, currently incarcerated people who work in the prisons, just recently testified in federal court that still not working, it's still an issue.
Okay, you're going to have to end it there. I want to let folks know Ryan Thornell will have to undergo a confirmation hearing before the state Senate be confirmed. That should be interesting. One more little fact, Arizona taxpayers spend $1.5 billion on their prisons. That bill's likely to go up.
Billion, huge money.
Jimmy Jenkins, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for telling the stories that need to be told.
That's my pleasure, Bram. Thank you.